A Spokane man who attempted to open a homeless shelter downtown last fall is now facing eviction just 8 months into that lease.
If you are to be evicted, what's the next step for you?
In my truck. I've given absolutely everything I can.
Pastor Ron Nelson with God's Love International is fighting to avoid eviction after missing several rent payments. His landlord fighting to have him removed.
Nelson owes more than $30,000 with no options on his own to make these payments. This story goes back several months. KXLY's Jordan Smith has been tracking it from the beginning. He joins us in studio with how we got to this point and what happens next. Jordan.
Well, this started back in July. Pastor Ron Nelson with God's Love International paid 6 months of upfront rent with the money he acquired from selling his home in Deer Park to get this property. He'd hoped that that window would be enough time for his church to receive grants to fund their proposed shelter. 8 months later, though, still nothing. Ron Nelson came to Second Avenue with a mission: serve the homeless. But just 8 months after that lease began, they've only serviced the homeless for a few weeks. Fire code violations and zoning roadblocks keeping his doors shut. Unable to procure funding for his proposed shelter, he's yet to pay rent this year.
We haven't paid rent for 2 months.
His landlord sending a 3-day pay or vacate notice on January 31st, a notice that Nelson ignored.
Obviously, if we don't have the grant, we can't pay the rent, we can't buy the building, we're going to leave. But it didn't seem prudent for us to leave when this is our whole goal and this is what God's telling us to do, is fight for the building.
But the complaints from his landlord extend beyond late payments. Court documents indicate Spokane police were dispatched over 70 times to this location since the lease began. Alleged assault and drug usage among those incident reports.
Did people use drugs in the bathroom? Absolutely. Did I catch people selling drugs out in the back parking lot? Absolutely. Did I immediately remove them from the property? Absolutely.
Those documents also indicate that Nelson agreed to release the property back to the landlord on February 13th, an agreement that Nelson turned back on.
The board originally thought that we had to get out, and that was not the case. We had sought some advice and found out that no, there's a procedure just like there is for residential.
The process to acquire grants takes several months at a time, and Nelson says they can only be acquired once the recipient has an established building. So coming into this, you must have known this would have been a difficult situation.
I did.
Did the landlord know that?
Yes.
And Nelson says he will hear tomorrow if he will obtain a $3 million grant from the Department of Commerce. And if so, he says he'll use that money to pay off the rent and make an offer to purchase that building. After speaking with the attorney of the landlord, however, I'm told they won't consider that offer. They just want to reclaim possession of their property. And if that happens, Nelson says he'd be interested in purchasing the Redemption Church on 2nd and Division. Aaron, Kirsten?